The following morning, Anna, Olson, and Aaron visited Isabella as she was making a bit of breakfast, using some of the dehydrated meals, but this time cooked properly on the stove. She was just setting down a bowl at the table for herself when she heard a knock on the door. Isabella walked to it, listened closely with her ear, making sure it wasn't Richard, and then she opened it to see her three friends. They nervously smiled at her, looking almost embarrassed to be there. Aaron glanced around inside and he said, "So, even though you rejected his offer, you still slept in this house, huh?" Isabella grimaced and shrugged. Didn't really have much of a choice. Anna stepped forward and gave Isabella a friendly hug as she explained, "We're as on the fence about him as you are, believe me, Isa. But you can't really deny this is a nice place he made." "It's all suggestive nature, I assure you, Anna," Isabella said. "But it's nice to see you guys again." You're not thinking of going back to the tent?" You're not thinking of going back to the tent?" As Aaron asked curiously. Not really, honestly. It's got a working stove, air conditioning, and it looks really impressive. You guys want to stay for a little bit? Maybe chat some more like old times?" Anna smirked. "What else can you do when the rest of the world looks barren and ugly?" And so she invited them in as they sat at the nicely dressed dinner table, all sitting across from the one bowl cooked to perfection. While in the kitchen, Isabella made three more. Isabella's meal was a plate of biscuits and gravy with Italian sausage and home mashed potatoes. Anna's meal was a plate of a medium-sized juicy steak with steamed vegetables. Olson was given a chicken Alfredo bowl topped with spiced chopped onions. And finally, Aaron's meal was an expertly chopped salmon with teriyaki sauce and assorted peas, carrots, corn, and other vegetables. The meals were so good that nobody acted or seemed picky. After all, if they were still salvaging the dehydrated meals from the bunkers, but also the only other choice was to eat a small beef and cheese sandwich from Tetch's free meal program, it was better to eat good than to eat cheap. No one clearly knew that better than Ranon Tetch, who generously set this house up for obviously one of his biggest haters, and now her equally hating group of real friends she'd had. And ironically, the only thing they would talk about now was how oddly supportive of Isabella he had been acting lately, which inevitably brought up the only question possible. "What if he was still in love with you?" Olson first asked. Isabella scoffed. "First off, that's extremely obvious. And second, I'd rather kiss a cobra than kiss him again." Anna added, "Nevertheless, he's been acting much more different than he was last time, right? Almost like he's been changing." "No shit," Isabella said bitterly, as she ate a warm forkful of her meal. "Haven't you heard? He's the man of the people now." "No, she doesn't mean for the people, Isa," Aaron added. "She means for you. Richard's been changing for you." "And what changes there been, Aaron?" Isabella shot back, catching them all off guard. "Every second I get, he's been trying to incorporate himself into my everyday life, practically by force. He personally excavated me first, until I told him off. He voluntarily ushered me to the lab the day I first got my papyrus skin, and stayed in the lab while it was happening. He made it certain that I couldn't go a full month without doing one of his project jobs. And then he makes the precaution to make sure that we also have to wear hazmat suits over our papyrus skins, when the papyrus skins were literally crafted so we didn't have to wear those damn things in the first place." "Not gonna lie, you've got some decent points there, Isabella," Anna remarked. Suddenly, Isabella's eyes narrowed as she stared intensely at her friends. "You guys said yourselves he was going to screw me over, and you were right. Why are you taking his side now all of a sudden?" "It's not that we're taking his side, Isa," Olson pointed out nervously. Anna finished his words. "But it looks like you might be a little too dismissive of him. Did you guys not forget about the fact that he nearly turned me into a criminal not even a week before the Ecollision?" Isabella asked, dumbfounded. "We were there outside Tetch Technologies, attempting to break in at night because there was a project Richard was going to show me that he was making to help my dying father. And at the worst possible moment, we got caught by the police. And then he left me out there to take the fall, right when I expected him to be there for me. I sat in jail for 4 days before the cops had finally realized I wasn't the culprit. I couldn't care less what happened to Richard Tetch after that. Okay, yeah, that's a perfect reason to still hate him, Aaron said, surprised. Instantly, Isabella said, "Leave. Now. Take the meals or don't, I don't care. Just get out." Looking worriedly at their now angry friend, Anna, Olsen, and Aaron got up from the table. Olsen was the only one who took his bowl with him, and walked out the door. But before Anna stepped out, she said to Isabella, "All we're trying to say is you should at least acknowledge what he's been doing. And maybe that could lead up to something better between you two. Just think about that for a while, Lisa." And after Anna left through the door, Isabella got up from that table, went to a comfy recliner, and sat down, deep in thought, considering something positive between the two of them for the first time in a while. Later that morning, everyone who had papyrus skins were gathered around the survival camps, so Renan Tetch could make a few announcements, while the others who had to wear hazmat suits instead stood in the back. Notably, he'd said that during the course of almost a full year since humanity had safely been excavated from the bunkers, he had been working behind the scenes to build the ideal utopia, using their own Neo-Egyptian culture. And even though the world was literally barren because the Ecollision took everything they had before, they had one advantage when it came to the planned construction of the beacon, the largest pyramid ever crafted out of copper, of what would now be forever referred to as the Rune Capital. And that was the sheer, if only minimal, expertise in what a society should look like. And through these actions, the Rune Capital would be split up into 7 bold districts, which would be constructed and then laid out, as if each part of the Rune Capital was its own little city inside. This would emphasize how large their new civilization would appear to be, and with enough hard work, it could be even grander than that. In conclusion, Ranon continued, our workload will be doubled, but our progress is allowed to wait every other day if anyone so desires. And I predict by next year's time, we will have at least 75% of the construction done and crafted. I'll guarantee that after the following 2 Christmases, our society will be rebuilt into the last genuine era that the Ecollision cruelly took away from us before. But know that while I shall create all the blueprints and the inner workings of the Rune Capital Utopia, I'll never have gotten it done without you all today. For today's plans only, we shall be cancelling the project jobs, and all I want is for everyone to settle down for a while if you must. But tomorrow, we'll start working at a rate faster than before. As the Egyptians themselves declared upon their people, your king was descended to us by the gods themselves, yet he is still mortal. And in the confines of our society, that means I am still human, like all of you. That is all for today, and I'll be in my drawing quarters if anyone should ask me to speak to me in the meantime. Good luck, and may all your futures burn bright, as your mere civilian lives in the past once did. Isabella was among the crowd when it dispersed, and everyone returned to their sides to relax. She was still contemplating on whether or not she should at least start giving Richard a second chance, but then she'd thought back to the sounds he made last night out of saddened horror when she'd basically called him pathetic and worthless in his attempts to woo her. Did he still feel like that today? After clearly positioning himself as a genuine man of the people that morning, it seemed he did take her criticisms to heart and started being more focused on everyone, more than just her. Isabella walked through the sand towards his tent that she found him in last night and peeked through the curtain, hoping to try to catch a glimpse of him. But then she started to hear the on-key, slightly somber, slightly optimistic strumming of an acoustic guitar from the other side of the tent. Cautiously and carefully, she let herself in and walked towards his makeshift kitchen on a long wooden table. And then she finally walked over to the very same, slightly tall, high-tech building that had fit inside his tent. She saw the door was closed, and on the front was a latch that was shaped like an old-fashioned wheel, similar to a bank vault or a pirate's ship. Hoping not to disturb him, she tried opening it, but it still made the creaking noise. When she came around the whole way, Rick had stopped strumming his guitar. He was listening closely. With the final creak, Isabella pulled the unlocked door open and saw him sitting on the top of his bed in the dark. The room looked nearly empty. He turned towards her before she could speak, as he looked at her with his guilty, slightly teared-up eyes. "You were right," Rick said. "I have been way too fixated on you to try to think about anyone else. So I'm going to change all that, starting from this very day. You did not have to further rip my heart to get me to understand where you're coming from. You can leave now." Rick solemnly turned back towards the dark and strummed his guitar in the same, almost monotonous tune. "Wait!" Isabella said, reaching out, making him stop playing again. Gradually, Rick grimaced, put his acoustic guitar, and stood up. A ray of light from outside shone into his eyes, which were still teared up slightly, but now had a slight bitter rage in his tone, too. "What more do you want from me, Isabella?" Rick said angrily. "I did what you said I had to do, and yet even after that, you still look down on me. Isn't my hairstyling this time? Did your real friends trail you to try to beat me down even further than you done last night? Why are you still even here right now? To apologize!" Isabella cried out, stomping her foot in frustration. He turned solemn again as he said, "Words can't take back what you told me about my advancements." As he turned to sit back down and play his guitar again, Isabella nervously rubbed her left shoulder to her elbow, looking just as guilty as he did. After a little bit of contemplation, Isabella broke the somber silence again, accompanied only by his guitar, as she then admitted, "You know, I did end up sleeping in that house you made last night." Rick stopped playing his guitar again, but not out of frustration this time as he listened to her words. "It's a cozy view," Isabella explained, "given it's going to overlook the future. And I did try to talk to Anna, Olsen, and Aaron this morning. They had told me to at least acknowledge that you may have been trying to help me." Rick put his guitar down on the side of the bed again and turned towards her, still sitting down. "I was trying to help you. That's all I've been trying to do, Isabella. Ever since the end of the world showed me what little I had left after my father had passed, I've become more aware about how bleak this whole situation is. And that now, if Tetch Technologies led the world in its pre-Ecollision heyday, then it fits best as a memory to his legacy, however kind it really was, to be the beacon for humanity everyone needed right now in the same way. When we lost all order and were sent into chaos, I reflected on my actions too, and I noticed how I almost turned you into something you're not. You've always looked to the future with an optimistic smile, Isabella, even before your dreams as an ecologist were turned into the very rubble the rest of the world is now. I've been intending to do the same as you, just like I should have done. Instead of that boy who'd always intended to be the embodiment of chaos, I shall now be the bold leader of a new, orderly society to bring life back to an old world probably not even worth saving anymore." Suddenly, there seemed to be a glimmer between them as Isabella looked into Rick's eyes one more time. Not manipulative, but genuine. Rick smiled, not of a charming debonair, but legitimately of the hopeful 21-year-old he was now and aspired to be. But then Isabella shook her head and then cleared her throat. She crossed her feet and she stood on them, nervously wobbling as she said, "So, I've been thinking, only if you have the time, of course, but if you're going to be this big ruler of a neo-Egyptian society, and you did insinuate I could be a part of it, would you mind if I played a role in the construction of it, overlooking where things will be from your eventual great perch? Or at least helping everyone be situated into the 7 districts you were talking about earlier?" Rick's eyes widened in shock, because he didn't expect her to be in the crowd during that speech. He didn't even see her. With a gentle look on his face, he smiled and responded, "Not at all, my dear Isabella, not at all." Then they stared at each other in surprise before Isabella ran out of the tent, before that moment could get even more awkward. At some point in the early afternoon, after Anna, Aaron, and Olsen had eaten lunch, Isabella spoke with them in that nice house Rick had constructed for her again, and at the very same table they talked at earlier that morning. However, much like the ironic topic they discussed earlier, the perspective had once again flipped. She explained to them how she was reconsidering Rick's motivations like they'd told her to, and she voluntarily promoted herself to join. He'd said yes, and the following morning they would talk again as production on the Rune Capital would finally kick into high gear. When she gave a pause to let them give their thoughts, they were speechless, shocked, excited, and even a little nervous. You sure you're not taking it too fast, right, Isabella? Anna asked. Her eyes widened with shock, then slightly squinting with worry and confusion. Remember, you guys still broke up for justified reasons, and moving in this close this soon is not a smart idea. Arguably less smart than suddenly dismissing him. Anna, he'd said himself he did some thinking over his 1-year-long expedition, Isabella explained. Trust me, he's being as careful about this as possible, and so am I. We understand, Isa, but, Olsen looked nervous, and the vibrant blushing on his face was proof. Poor Olsen almost looked embarrassed, to tell you the truth. Are you still going to have time with us while you're now being prepped up as the Jewel of the Nile and such? Gently, Isabella put her hands on Olsen's shoulders. Looking him in the eye, she said, Olsen Freeman, I can assure you now that Rick will put in the time for me to visit. And if he doesn't, I will, no matter what he thinks about it. Just nervous is all, Olsen muttered. Isabella chuckled and said, You're always nervous. Just trust me on this, guys. I know exactly what I am doing. I am well aware of what this means, and I'm going to take it one step at a time. Even still, you're going to be the new flower of the Nile for the future pharaoh, Aaron remarked, utterly shocked. That's huge, considering where we're building off of. You could be one of the most influential figures in the history of humankind. Are you sure you were able to handle the pressure, Isabella? Isabella chuckled. Aaron, I held Homecoming Queen in recognition for it for a whole 3 months. And that was before I even met Rick. Olsen nervously chuckled. You always did look out for the best of us, the ones that deserved better. Even in the bunkers, I always felt a connection between us. You were looking out for us and keeping us safe. The rest of us only went when you did, because we knew if you thought it was safe for us. Anna nodded in agreement. We don't mean to sound hypocritical, and we don't mean to sound like we're taking the wrong sides for the wrong reason. But we hope the best for you, whatever this could lead to, and that's all we've ever wanted. Isabella grinned and chuckled again. I know, guys, it's what you've always wanted, and whatever we've been through, especially after the Ecollision, I hope none of that's changed. Especially him, Aaron corrected. Isabella laughed sharply, and she said, Yeah. Suddenly, her smile started to shift into a more nervous and unsure, even afraid tone. Even if she did believe he'd changed for good, a part of her was still afraid of him, or was nervous about his new change anyway. Why was that? It certainly wasn't something she understood herself, and why she didn't was an even bigger mystery. Isabella shook her head, brushing away, and smiled nervously, turning back to Aaron and replying, especially him. Once again, why did it feel so unnerving, saying what really felt like the honest-to-raw truth?